Hello, lovelies. Do you currently have cancer, or are you in remission from cancer? You need to hear my top 5 emotional mental roots to cancer. Awareness is key. If any of these resonate even just a little, this may be a very vital and pivotal piece of information for your healing journey. So please do remember that you deserve honest self-reflection. So go deep, even if it's uncomfortable, because you deserve, again, what could be the difference maker in your health. Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Matejka, and I help those with cancer navigate their inner journey towards health and wellness on all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically, and spiritually, to stack the odds in their favor. And as you heard, today I'm going to focus on an emotional component of cancer. Mental is kind of a part of it too, but mostly emotional. And of course, that's not to say there aren't physical or other causes to cancer that are important. It's just that's not what I'm focusing on today. I'm going to be focusing on the emotional aspects because these deserve so much more attention than they get. And so I would like to shed some light on them for you, because the sad truth is, if these are contributing factors or causes and they are not properly dealt with, your chances of healing, if you have a serious diagnosis, it's going to be a lot more difficult. It's going to be a lot more difficult, if at all possible, because this is a key component. And I do first want to say, as someone with a Master's of Science degree in Integrative Medicine Research, these top 5 are not based on a meta-analysis, they're not based on an official study, they're based on anecdotal evidence, i.e. my own experience from my own practice, as well as consulting with other health practitioners. So just wanted to throw that out there. But what's interesting is there is so much research these days that show the power of our thoughts. In fact, it is now shown in research that thoughts create anywhere between 70 to 90% of disease. Isn't that crazy? I won't get into all the science of it, but it kind of goes like this. Each type of thought we think is associated with a certain neuropeptide, and that neuropeptide can affect cellular expression and DNA transcription, so certain genes are turned on and off. This is kind of like epigenetics related to that. And with certain genes being repeatedly activated by the same type of information, they actually begin to wear out like gears on a car, and the structures become weaker and the functions become lessened, and this is what leads to aging and illness. So just a little fun science there. But all right, so what are these 5 mental emotional roots then? Okay, so in no particular order, number 1 is grief. Grief is a big one. So what's interesting about the grief component related to cancer is it falls on both ends of the spectrum. That is, people that are you could say, people that are overindulging their grief. I mean, for lack of a better word. So these are people who perhaps it's been 5 to 10 years since they lost a loved one, and it's like it was yesterday, that sort of thing. It's very obvious, it's very palpable. They just cannot get over this loss. And grief is a serious thing. So, and just to make clear, so this grief, it could be the loss of a loved one, whether family, friend, it could be a pet. That can be very traumatic for people, of course, as they become family members as well. But it doesn't have to be a living being. It could be grief over the loss of a relationship or a business or something of that nature as well. The other end of the spectrum of grief is people who repress their grief. In fact, they may think that they dealt with the loss very, very well because it's seemingly not affecting them at all. And even people around them are like, oh wow, they seem perfectly fine. But the truth is they just repressed the grief, and it's just buried deep within them. So in both of these cases, the grief is still inside and it's not properly dealt with in a healthy, emotionally processing kind of way. So I'm not going to get deep into like why people do this and psychoanalyzing people and the detriments. I really just want to bring the awareness if any of these things resonate with you and why you may have cancer. So yeah, just to keep it simple and recap that, grief, and that could be overindulging, just not being able to get out of that state, or repressed grief, where you seem perfectly fine. You might even think you're perfectly fine, but really you just have not dealt with the grief that is inside of you. You have not allowed yourself to feel it. And then number 2 is major trauma. So some of these can be overlapping, you know, because the cause of grief could be a major trauma and a major trauma could cause grief. Some of these are going to be overlapping, but they do deserve their own categories. So number 2, major trauma. So what is a major trauma? The thing is, it really is dependent on the person, because it's not so much the event, it's how the event was perceived, what story was made about the event. So, but typically though, it is something relatively significant, like sexual trauma, childhood trauma, you know, something that was a shocking event. Typically, a lot of these happen in childhood or youth, teenage, maybe young adult, but it could be a wide range of things, really. But it could just be, you know, parents getting a divorce. It could be a relationship ending. And again, it could seem fine to other people, like not that big of a deal, but to that person, if this is you, you know, it's all about how it's held. It's all about how it's perceived and how it's taken, and the stories, you know, we tell ourselves about it and how we take it in and internalize it. So traumas, essentially, when stored, of course, can eventually lead to cancer. And then number 3 is parent wound. Parent wound. So again, this could go a little bit hand in hand with major trauma. Major trauma could be abuse, violence, it could be all sorts of things I didn't mention. So anything that seems like a major trauma, like what the person would perceive as the worst thing that happened in their life, typically would be the major trauma. Parent wound. So this can be things like parental, it could be just one of the parents or both, parental neglect, abandonment, abuse, maybe just not having enough support or encouragement. So parent wounds are huge, mother wounds, father wounds, these sorts of things, because they stem from childhood and because a lot of things, a lot of issues we have as adults, a lot of our patterns, conditioning, limiting beliefs come from childhood. So a lot of these things are stored, which is why, since they're stored, they can eventually lead to cancer. And then number 4 is shame or guilt. They're different, but they're similar, so I'm lumping them together. Guilt or shame. For those of you that are familiar with the work of David Hawkins and the energy frequency scale, you'll know that guilt and shame are of the lowest vibrational energy emotions. They're very, very low on the scale. They're gravitational, they're heavy, they bring us down, as opposed to, you know, the ones that are radiational, that bring us up. Peace, love, courage, that sort of thing. So guilt and shame are like bottom. They're very, very low vibrational energies. Therefore, you know, they rob us of a lot of our energies and can lead, when stored and not dealt with, they can lead to all kinds of chronic illnesses. Cancer is just one of them. So all of these things I'm mentioning can cause chronic illnesses. Cancer is just one of them that they can cause. So guilt and shame, Could be from a multitude of things. Again, a lot of these can be interrelated. If there was a major life trauma of sexual abuse, that could also lead to the guilt and the shame. Or it could just be having way too high of expectations of ourselves. I know that sounds bad because I love to dream big, but for just sake of understanding what I'm trying to say right now, people can have guilt and shame just because they don't, maybe they didn't achieve something that they wanted to achieve, so now they don't feel good enough. So there's guilt and shame for not feeling good enough, for someone feeling they should be better, like, oh, I should have done better, I should have done this better, I shouldn't have made that decision, regret. I could have gotten myself a better job or a better whatever. These things can lead to guilt or shame as well. And and then number 5 that I'm going to be talking about. So number 5 is interesting. Number 5 is the Martyr Pattern, aka people pleasing. So this is like a pattern of people, they'll always sacrifice themselves, self-sacrifice, self-sacrifice, self-sacrifice. They'll do everything for others, which can seem like a noble thing. It can seem like a beautiful, altruistic thing. But the problem is, these people, they're running this martyr pattern because they deep down have issues of fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, not feeling good enough. So they'll do whatever it takes on the outside, essentially to appease everybody and make sure that they're seen in the best light possible. So it's not exactly coming from a good place, because as we know, we have to love it's great to love other people and help them, but we need to love ourselves first and foremost and take care of ourselves. Self-care, self-nurturing. I mean, we can't pour from an empty cup, all that kind of stuff. So essentially what ends up happening is the cancer does happen to a lot of people with these martyr people-pleasing patterns. And it really is kind of a, dare I say, lesson in a way, because it ends up showing these people like, oh wow, I need to slow down now and take care of myself. I hear this over and over again. This is a common thing. They finally realize like, oh shit, I've been taking care of everybody all the time. Now I need to take care of myself. And maybe they totally neglected to take care of themselves in a way where their physical health did decline, because they weren't caring about their physical health, because they were worrying, they didn't have time. They didn't put the time into it because they were worried about everybody else and taking care of everybody else. So the cancer allows them a time to actually start taking care of themselves, and also asking other people for help, and them being able to receive support and help from others is a really big lesson. So with all of these themes, oh, by the way, if I had to pick 6, I would say anger. I didn't want to leave out anger because that is a common one that can lead to cancer as well. So I'm just going to give it an honorable mention as number 6, but I'm going to keep it as a top 5. So pretty much all of these themes, all of these 5 themes, we have grief, major life trauma, parent wound, shame, guilt, martyr pattern. So all of these have in common, essentially, they are repressed or suppressed emotions. So repressed emotions are where it's done unconsciously, we don't even know about it. Like when I was talking about the people that repress grief to the point they don't even know, they thought they dealt with it. Or suppressed emotions is when you're consciously burying the emotions. So repressing and suppressing emotions, it leads to chronic disease. It just does. There's a beautiful book about this if you'd like to learn more about the letting go technique. It's called Letting Go by David Hawkins. So also, I know I mention this sometimes, so I'm going to mention it again. Kelly A. Turner's research on spontaneous remission, she studied spontaneous remission for decades, of what are the common factors that cancer survivors have in common, those that went through a spontaneous remission, like a miraculous healing essentially. And two of the factors she found they have in common is they released suppressed emotions, so that pretty much supports what I just said, as well as increasing positive emotions. So there definitely is an emotional link here. So there is some science to show that. And if you'd like to hear more about Kelly A. Turner's research and what the other 8 common healing factors are of cancer patients that have a spontaneous remission, then you can go to the description box of my YouTube channel. There's like that description box, and there's a link in there where you can get a free ebook. It's like 38 pages. I don't know if that counts as a book. It's like 38 pages. It's a beautiful article that I wrote about her research, and also throwing in a little bit of my own flavor. And yeah, if you click the link, you can just get that emailed to you, and it's something that I think everybody who is beginning their cancer journey should definitely read. And so, you know, don't be hard on yourself if any of these resonated with you. That is actually cause for celebration. Don't be hard on yourself, because again, we don't want to perpetuate this guilt shame thing. There's no reason to be upset. It's no one's fault, but it is your responsibility. You know, you were just acting in a way that came natural for you, and that's just the way it is. There's nothing wrong with that, but there is a better way, and that's where we need to work on dealing with these things. Dealing with these things, these 5 things, whichever one resonated with you, is what can really lead to a lasting healing. And there's many, many ways of dealing with them, you know, much too much to get into here. So it may be a more traditional type of therapy. It may be just finding a life coach that really resonates with you, one that you really jive with, you know, that's shares some of your beliefs. It might be doing like a plant medicine ceremony, or a shamanic ritual, or finding a healer with some energy work, or doing some, you know, other psychological programs like DBT or Psych-K, or psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. I mean, there's any number of things and tools. It could just be, maybe you just can do it on your own with like journaling, and you know, that's not for me to judge, but that's for you to figure out. And another good book is by Dr. Joe Dispenza, You Are the Placebo. He really gets into the science of things, of how we think can create what's going on in our bodies. So yeah, and I, of course, as far as like, one more thing I wanted to mention. So these things causing the cancer, like I said, don't beat yourself up. It's a reason to celebrate, because you figured out that awareness, which is very, very key. And you know, everything is different for people. A lot of people, I would say almost everybody, has some kind of trapped emotions in their body because they are stored in the body. That's why things like breath work can release it. So that's another good modality. Somatic release breath work. There's certain like chiropractic modalities that can release trauma in the body. You know, it's a normal human thing. These things get stored in the body, and for some people they lead to disease, and you know, because we're not giving them the proper outlet of letting them go. Essentially, that's what we need to do, is surrender the resistance and let these emotions go, which is a very conscious technique, you know. So it's something that does take awareness and work. But when we're not doing that, which is, I mean, really, which is pretty much almost everybody, so don't feel bad. Different things happen to different people. Some people are going to get some chronic diseases after a while, and some people might just, you know, be unconsciously sabotaging all of their relationships, or any number of ways these things can come out, you know. So why it happens one way for one person and a different way for another, I certainly don't have the answers for that. But if you have beliefs similar to mine, I think it is all meant for a reason. I think all of these things that happen to us, these challenges, these perceived obstacles in our lives, I think it's feedback. So it's good to, like, that's why it's good to go deep and self-reflect and dig a little deep and try to have some awareness of what's going on, because there's feedback there. We just have to find it. So what's the feedback from life, from the universe, God, whatever it is you believe in? It's like the rumble strip, you know, when we get a little off course, we're gonna meet some resistance, we're gonna hear some noise, we're gonna be woken up, so to speak, by something in our external world. So I think it's a good thing because it sheds light on what we need to do and where we need to go next. So hopefully this helped you in some way, and maybe none of those things have anything to do with you, and that is totally possible. That is totally possible. But I still invite you just to be sure and maybe journal about this and just really think about it for a couple days. All right, my lovelies, again, your free gift ebook guide article thing that I wrote about the 10 common healing factors amongst cancer patients who had a spontaneous remission, what they all had in common. You can get that free guide if you go in the description box and click that link. And then also like and subscribe. Leave me a comment of what you think about all this. That would be very, very great as I try to spread some help to others. All right, thank you everybody. Much love.